Hi, and thanks for joining us on the Caerusnet Podcast. I have with me today somebody who's just a joy to be around, and coincidentally, that is her name, Joy Dettling. And Joy is a member of my Brighton Wednesday 10 o'clock group. And one of the things that I always like to do now on the Caerusnet Podcast, before we jump into Joy's story and figure out who she is I like to go back in time just a little bit and thank the person that told her about Caerusnet. So why don't you go ahead and just give us the 30 seconds on how it happened, Joy? Who told you about Caerusnet? Where were you at in your business at that time?
Oh, I remember the exact moment I heard about Caerusnet. I was on the phone with my buddy Brian Truskowski, who has been a Caerusnet member for quite some time as a body worker, a very skilled body worker, I will say. And I was just kind of talking to him about how I was wanting to network more locally. And that was, and I wanted to meet in person too. It was kind of like in that time period about a year ago where things were starting to open up more, people were wanting to meet in person more. And I was like, I want to really get into in-person networking again and, making more local connections. And he was like, you got to check out Caerusnet. And that was history in the making right there.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian Truskowski. We appreciate you and all the Caerusnet members that speak up and share what we've got with other people. So, and Joy's been with Caerusnet for a year now, and it's been great to have her in the network. Tell us, Joy, about what it is that you do, name of your business, and what it is that you are set out to do.
So my business is Upswing Wellness. I'm a wellness practitioner, and I like to call myself a healing and growth facilitator. Really what I do is I assist people in accelerating their path on personal growth and healing. And I do that in a multitude of ways. And I think describing my backstory a little bit actually is a really good segue into explaining what I do and who I work with. So I'll start there. So for much of my life, I've actually struggled with a lot of chronic health issues myself, and also over time could see that there was also a strong link with anxiety too for myself from a very young age. And me being the very curious person that I am and kind of just have a very determined personality, always trying new things, I've really always explored like all the little nooks and crannies of natural health and alternative wellness. And it's like, I have tried everything. I have explored everything. I've done so much just personal research because it's always been a curiosity. And a lot of that was propelled by the fact that a lot of my life, I just didn't feel quite the vitality that I knew I could feel. So I was always kind of seeking and searching, and that kind of led me into, just kind of continuing to move into wellness. My first step into that was yoga. And I was a yoga teacher for several years. And then I kind of started creating my own business, yoga business. And I was getting into corporate yoga, and then I was getting into teaching privately one-on-one. And then I eventually got into a period of my life where there was so much stress and change. I had relationship issues, financial issues, creating a new business. I had just moved to a new city. And so I had so much different stress in my life that it actually pushed my health over the edge. And at that time, my health already was kind of teetering. But with so much stress, it kind of knocked me down. And I had about a year where it was really challenging for me to function. And it was that time period of my life that really pushed me to dig even deeper. I'd already done so much exploration, but I realized it was time for me to explore further. I looked more at the emotional things that were going on for me, more the mental things. And I was just, continued to try and explore. And And this was also at a time when I was like seeing doctors and they couldn't really figure out what was wrong with me. I looked very healthy from all the tests that they did and everything. So I was just determined to figure this out because that's all that I could do. And I eventually pulled myself out of that period. I was able to heal myself and you know, and I found that there was a lot of personal discovery and growth that was a part of that as well. And as I came out of that, I was very inspired and empowered to move into coaching. And I wanted to coach people who had been through the same thing that I was going through or had been through, because I realized that there's actually not just me, but tons of people that fit in this kind of mysterious box, we'll call it, where there's kind of mysterious chronic health issues and no one can really figure out what's wrong with them. And there tends to be maybe some links to like some emotional imbalance and stress management. And so I realized that there's actually a lot of people out there that are going through the same thing. And I realized with all the experience I had built up my whole life that I was a great person to help people. So I started moving into coaching, and I was doing coaching for some years. And what that has led me to now is some very specific modalities that I use, which are completely natural, non-invasive, using various forms of frequency healing, which we can think of some, you know, sound therapy is becoming very popular right now. There's things like homeopathy. There's various forms of frequency healing that have been around for a long time. And so I use various forms of frequency healing to help people get past any of the subconscious blocks that are helping them for moving forward. Because a lot of times what I find is when people have an issue that they've worked on for a long time, like, and that's a lot of the people I work with, they've done their work, they've done their research, but they're still not getting better. And that's kind of where I was at. Like my whole life I'd been the healthiest lifestyle you could ever imagine. However, I didn't feel good. And so I find that a lot of the people I work with are in the same kind of thing where they've done a lot of their work, but they're still not getting better. And when I hear that, it really kind of a flip switches in my mind that there's something more on a subconscious level that needs adjusting and assisting. And that's really the work that I do, works more on a subconscious level.
Yeah, one of the things that I remember too is that we did one of the sound frequency sessions, and that was really cool because, you know, I live in Arizona, you were in Michigan, and we were able to do the healing frequencies through the phone while I was laying down. And I actually felt fantastic. I felt like things became unblocked in me, and you could tell just what areas were, you know, maybe harboring the most tension or other things, blockages. And I was really just amazed that you could even do that, you know, from Michigan over a phone. So you're pretty diverse in how you can engage with clients.
Yes, yeah. And that's the thing is I do work with actually the majority of my clients, I work with them remotely at a distance. And some of that I'm able to work remotely with people because I actually use like a software and a technology device, which I can just send them and we can kind of communicate through the internet. So cool. But also too, like what you experience, which is called a modality I use called biofield tuning, is also that, and this is where things get a little out there, but what's really cool is the things that I've really chosen and bring together, it's really bringing more esoteric concepts together with science.
Yes.
Like bringing those two things together. And because we can't deny that there is this sense that like everything is connected in one way or another. And that's how we were able to work together remotely, is that I was really just able to connect with your energy field through intention and just with the use of frequency and sound, create more balance in your system. So
yeah, it was a very, very cool session. So it sounds to me like we might have answered a question that I've got on my little list to ask people, which is, you know, who's your ideal client? And I think that what you were saying there, it's people that have not been able to solve the mystery of their health issues, even though they've done a lot of work, they've tried lots of things, and they're still at the end of the rope, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah. And this can be in all aspects of life, I'd say. Like if, some people are struggling with this with their health, like I was. I think sometimes there's people that are struggling more with success or like business success. And they notice like, I feel like I'm always sabotaging myself. I'm always getting in my own way. Like, why can't I just like rearrange my brain so that things can flow? This can happen in relationships. It's like, why do I always end up with this same type of person that ends up like, just leaving me or whatever it is, And so it's like, especially when we notice like we get stuck in these ruts and in these patterns that seems like we just keep doing it again and again. I get in my own way. I'm sabotaging myself. The stuff that I use, it's very powerful for allowing our mind to kind of like have a wider perception so that we see that, oh, there's way more options than I'm used to seeing. One of the names of this, one of the things that I do, I call perception reframing, because that's what it does. It allows the perception to just open up. And then if I am to think about like an ideal client, who's the type of person that I could work with all day long, like just love it, it lights me up. It's definitely people that kind of have that same kind of backstory that I've had, where there's kind of this long battle with chronic health issues. They kind of, it's for me, I always feel like it's just something that's close to my heart because I spent so much of my energy in that kind of place. And also anxiety, because that was a big link in my own story that I found, and like a big piece that I really needed to unlock was really exploring and figuring out, how do I unravel my own anxiety? And I just think too that anxiety has become such a huge issue in the past couple of years. It's become so common in all age ranges. I'm even having a lot of younger people, especially, where this has been a huge thing for them. And the thing too with anxiety is it can present itself in lots of different ways. I actually wasn't even aware that I was struggling with anxiety till my mid-20s, even though I can look back and recognize that I was struggling with anxiety since probably like 5 or 6 years old. But it's like, it became so normalized to me that I didn't realize that, like, oh, my nervous system is not able to regulate when there's stressors in my environment. And so I think for a lot of us, it becomes invisible, and it might show up as physical symptoms. It might show up as just like we feel overwhelmed all the time, we get burnt out easily. But it can also, that there's also, it's a very wide range for anxiety, where it can be just, oh, I feel stressed. And you can also have at the other end, big traumatic events that can just shoot our nervous system into fight or flight. And we really need some assistance finding, how do we regulate our nervous system and, find a place to understand what's going on in our mind and in our bodies with that.
Yeah, you covered a whole lot there. So a quick question that I would have for you, I would assume that there have to be a high percentage of people that, if we're talking about your ideal client is somebody that's had chronic issues that they've been dealing with that don't seem to resolve. I would imagine that at a certain point, some people just are resigned to, oh, well, this is the way life is going to be for me, and may be discouraged to even talk with somebody or see what options might be out there, especially if it's somebody who is of the mindset that all of the answers happen at the doctor's office. So I would imagine you've got a little bit to kind of break through with people to help them understand that there are other solutions that might not even be on the table going through a traditional doctor. And then you also mentioned, you having anxiety maybe starting as young as 5 years old. It made me wonder, what is, what is an age category that you work with young people as well too, as long as obviously they can communicate and understand concepts, right? But you could work with kids in grade school that might be having anxiety or.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm finding too, and here's the thing too that I want to mention too about, you're talking about like people not being aware of what options are there to them and being like closed off to certain things. And like I just want to mention too that like I understand that because that's actually it's very ingrained in our culture to kind of take what our doctor tells us and kind of look at those things as the only options. And I think, I feel lucky that I actually grew up in a household where like alternative health was very normal for me as a kid. I was always seeing like kind of more alternative practitioners from a very young age. And I think like I think I have actually a really I think a little bit of a talent actually for talking to people who are on any range of the spectrum, whether they're deep into the alternative stuff, someone who's like way out there. I can talk to those people. And then at the same time, I can talk to people where this is like really intimidating stuff for them and maybe even a little bit scary. Or it seems like it's like woo woo way out there. But what I love about the things that I do is that it's bringing together like things that are more alternative, but bringing it together with science. And I love talking to people that are on all ranges of the spectrum, whether they are like, yeah, like sign me up, or if they're more of a skeptic and like uncertain. And for me, it's always important that I have a conversation with someone before we start working together so that we can see that it's a good fit on both sides. Because if I've seen this again and again, that if someone's holding a belief that something's not going to work for them, there's a very good chance it's not going to work for them. However, I think that I'm very skilled at helping people get past those kinds of those mental barriers or emotional blocks or physical blocks from things working for them. But also too, it's like it's important we have that first conversation so that we can be on the same page. And it's not like I am healing them, but it's that I am just like walking next to them on their own process. And I think it's really important for me that I empower the people that I work with and that they feel just as much in charge of what we're doing together in our sessions as I am as a facilitator. So I think it's, even for like working with kids, it's really important for me that I still have a conversation just with the child and make sure that like they want to do this and that this feels comfortable for them. Because even as a youngster, I think it's important that we feel like we have some sense of agency in our own process as well. So that's just something that's like, for me is critical in the work that I do, is just making sure that it's almost more like teamwork.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a perfect way to describe it, because there's that saying that says, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. There's another phrase that says a man convinced against his will is of the same conviction still. So you do have to have, buy-in and open-mindedness to work with somebody, because you're part of the healing process. You facilitate the healing process, but the person being healed has to be able to receive it for it to work properly. So, and then just to be sure I understand correctly, so somebody that's interested in connecting with you that says, geez, I think I'd like to speak with Joy to see if she is somebody that could help me in my area of distress. That's as easy as a phone call, conversation, a short Zoom meeting to say hello and see what's going on with them. And then you'd figure out, like, if it does sound like work you could do for that person, you would talk with that person about a potential plan to help them get better and what that looks like, dollars and cents and time commitment wise, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's always a thorough conversation before starting anything. So
yeah. And you're probably a very hard selling salesperson too, to get people to work with you, right? I really sense that about you, Joy. I'm totally joking, of course. You're such a great listener, and everybody's so relaxed around you. I hope that people are taking you up when you tell them you think you can help them, because people really, it doesn't matter how much wealth you have, if you don't have your health, you'll never be able to enjoy the other side of that equation. Let's jump into your business just a little bit. As we mentioned when we opened the podcast, you're a little, I think just a little bit over a year, maybe right around a year of your membership in Caerusnet. And I was just wondering, if do you have a success story, referral that came through the network that you'd want to share briefly with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just want to say, like, Caerusnet has been so great for my business. It definitely, it took some time for things to build up, but it's like once they have, like, I'm at a point where almost all the people I'm working with right now are Caerusnet or Caerusnet referrals, like connected one way or another. So it's really helped me a lot. And I have to admit that I was like a bit of a skeptic when I first joined Caerusnet, and I'm like delighted now, and I love it. And I like, for success stories, I've definitely had like so many, and I can think of just one. I think what's been really I can think of a recent one is, so I had another Caerusnet member come on and start working with me, and they ended up also, so I kind of gave a lot of my backstory, and they were able to recognize right away, like they kind of, read about my backstory on my website, and they were like, that's exactly my best friend. And so, they ended up referring their friend to me too, eventually. And so I was working with the two of them, separately. But what was really cool for me also as a practitioner was to have two individuals who are best friends still working with me at the same time, because I think they'd each do their individual work with me, and then they'd have times where they would go and they'd talk about like the stuff we were doing together, and they could kind of reflect the change to each other that they were seeing in each other. And what was really cool, and then I kind of get feedback where like each person would tell me like, I can't believe like the change I've seen in my friend. And I have to say too, like for me, it always continues to blow my mind, the work that I do on just the amount of change and transformation that I see in my clients. It's always just amazing. It lights me up. It's what like propels me to keep doing what I'm doing, is just seeing the transformation in people. So that was just really fun though too, to get like that kind of just interaction of having two people that knew each other really well, both kind of giving me a different perspective on each other's feedback. So
yeah, that is very, very cool. And I'm sure that those best friends, you're probably a large part of their conversations. And they're going to keep sharing you, because, when somebody's been impacted and their life is getting so much better, they realize that, they appreciate that, and people notice it. And when they notice it, they can say, well, I'll tell you, this is what I did. And then other people go, maybe I should do that. So I just think that's really, really fantastic. Last question I've got for you, Joy, is this. Everybody that comes into Caerusnet comes in from a little bit of a different background, different perspective on relationship building, and what the experience may be like on a Caerusnet team. So I'm hoping that there are some newer members or people that are considering being in the network. What's the biggest piece of advice you would have for any new members starting out? What would be like the biggest most helpful share you think you could share with them?
yeah, I think the most helpful thing would be to stick with it, first of all, which, as you know, Steve, there was a point, I don't know, maybe in my 6-month mark, where I was thinking about jumping ship, and I'm so grateful for you to like talking me away from the edge. But like the other part of it too is that like this is like, don't just look at this as like, how many clients am I going to get from this? But it's more, this is very much about building relationships and building like a team. And it's like when people, like when I do my trust builders, I'm generally more I'm not thinking so, or when I pick people that I want to do trust builders with next, a lot of it isn't so much based on their industry. It's more like, what's my feeling for that person? Is that someone who I can connect with on a personal level? Because I think when we build these really rich personal relationships, it's natural to want to refer them because it's like you already deep in your bones, you know that person, you know, whereas it's like I don't have to like be in my kind of analytical brain so much, like, okay, this person does this, that person does that, but it's just like if I know someone really well, they're with me all the time. And then if I meet someone who's a perfect, you know, fit to work with that person, it's just natural and it comes up. So it's like, I think for me, when I'm thinking about networking now, it's more just personal relationships is the, and then this is the fruit that grows out of that. But it's, I feel like if, and this is just what's really worked for me, you know, and that's kind of the way I operate. And I think it also just makes networking a lot more and fun, where I think a lot of us who are curious about Caerusnet, we've probably already dipped our toe into networking and little different networking experiences a lot. And for me, I kind of got like kind of burnt out and felt like some things just didn't feel so great. And what I love about Caerusnet though is it's a lot of the people that are in here are just like really interested in also just growing their team, their personal relationships, and just like being a part of the community. And so I think that's a great way to kind of look at it as you come into it.
Yeah, I love that too. I've mentioned you know, to many folks over the years that treat everybody on your team as though they could be one of your best referral sources, because sometimes people might make a mistake of thinking, well, you know, I'm in this type of an industry. Who am I ever going to refer somebody to for perception reframing? Well, nobody, if you don't know who Joy is and what she does and how she helps people. So that's why it's so important to have those trust builders. And I found for myself that because I treat everybody like they could be one of my best referral partners with that kind of respect and enthusiasm, that sometimes I get the best referrals coming from people that other people might have said, oh, how are you ever going to get a referral from that person? I'm like, well, you know, once people get to know you, they know your journey, they know your story, just like yourself. When people read your website and they realize the journey you've been on, once they like you and they get a sense that, yeah, this is a person that really wants to be helpful and they're genuine, then the last part is the trust, really, which is just showing up on time and delivering the things we say we're going to do. And once you get to all three of those things, that's a beautiful place to be. So Joy Dettling, Upswing Wellness, thanks so much for spending time with us today and sharing yourself with the network. This was a great interview and I've learned a ton. And again, if you'd like to reach out to Joy, her information, it will be in the drop down in Spotify and on YouTube. You can find her on the Caerusnet website. She'd love to do a trust builder with you. Don't be shy. Say hi to Joy, and Joy, thanks again so much for today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve.